today we're going beyond, just defining hypocrisy.
Right.
We're diving deep, into the Quran.
Okay.
Specifically, verses 17-20 of Surah Al-Baqarah.
Okay.
To grasp its impact through two really powerful analogies.
Okay.
A dying fire and a terrifying rainstorm.
Yeah. What's fascinating is how these metaphors, they offer us a glimpse into the inner workings of a hypocrite's mind.
Right.
Revealing not just their outward actions, but their internal struggles and their motivations.
Could you actually read those for us?
Of course. So in English, they read, "Their example is that of someone who kindled a fire. But when it illuminated all around him, God took away their light and left them in darkness, unable to see, deaf, dumb, and blind, so they will not return to the right path. Or like a rainstorm from the sky within which is darkness, thunder, and lightning. They put their fingers in their ears from the thunderclaps in dread of death, but God is encompassing of the disbelievers. The lightning almost snatches away their sight. Every time it illuminates for them, they walk therein. But when darkness comes over them, they stand still. And if God willed, he could have taken away their hearing and their sight. Indeed, God is over all things competent."
Wow. Okay, so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
Let's take it one verse at a time.
Okay.
Let's start with the dying fire analogy.
Okay.
The Quran describes someone desperately, seeking light in darkness. They kindle a fire, but it soon dies out, leaving them in even deeper darkness.
Right.
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
It is, and it speaks volumes about the nature of hypocrisy. Just
Yeah.
like that temporary fire, a hypocrite's light is fleeting and self-serving. They may appear righteous on the surface, but their inner world is shrouded in darkness.
The Quran's choice of words is so striking here.
Yeah.
Kindled a fire.
Right.
It emphasizes the smoke and ash, the impermanence,
Yeah.
which feels so different from the pure light of genuine faith.
That's an excellent point. The imagery underscores the ultimately destructive nature of hypocrisy. It's not a sustainable source of light or guidance.
Right.
Instead, it leads to a loss of perception,
Right.
a blindness to truth.
Yeah. It reminds me of verse 64.
Okay, let me read them for you. It says, "The hypocrites are apprehensive lest a surah be revealed about them, informing them of what is in their hearts. Say, mock as you wish. Indeed, Allah will expose that which you fear."
What's fascinating is how this verse captures their anxiety.
They're living in constant fear of being exposed.
It highlights that their deception isn't a source of strength.
It's actually this burden they're carrying around.
Exactly. It's like they know they're not on solid ground.
And that fear just eats away at them.
Right. It reinforces their inner turmoil, as we've been discussing.
It is a really clear example of the consequences of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
They're specifically afraid of divine exposure.
It's like they know they can't hide from God's judgment.
Right, and the verse acknowledges that mocking behavior.
That's the same mocking behavior we've seen in all these verses.
Yeah, it shows their lack of respect and deep insecurity.
Where the Quran describes the hypocrite's constant fear of exposure, it's like they're trapped in this internal turmoil,
Right.
knowing deep down that their light is an illusion.
Precisely. They're constantly looking over their shoulder, worried that their true motives will be revealed, that fear becomes a defining characteristic of their existence.
Okay.
But let's move on to that rainstorm analogy,
Okay.
which paints a completely different but equally compelling picture.
Imagine being a lone traveler caught in a desert storm. Darkness all around, thunder booming, lightning flashing,
Okay.
and you have absolutely no shelter.
It's almost a primal fear, isn't it?
It is, and that's the brilliance of this analogy. The rainstorm represents the flourishing Muslim community, a source of life and protection. Yet the hypocrite, like that traveler refusing shelter, chooses to remain outside,
Right.
exposed and vulnerable.
It's interesting how both analogies use sensory details to evoke such strong emotions.
Yes.
The dying embers,
Right.
the howling wind, the fear of lightning.
Yeah.
You can almost feel the hypocrite's isolation and desperation.
Absolutely. But the rainstorm analogy adds another layer.
Okay.
It points to the hypocrisy of rejecting a supportive community while still trying to benefit from its existence. It's like they want the fruits of the garden without tending to the soil.
Yeah.
Right.
And just as that traveler fears being struck by lightning,
Yeah.
the hypocrite fears the revealing verses of the Quran, those thunderbolts that expose their hypocrisy.
Right. And the verses you asked about specifically address hypocrites and their impact on the community.
Sure, they say, if the hypocrites and those in whose hearts is disease and those who spread rumors in Medina do not cease, we will surely incite you against them. Then they will not remain your neighbors therein except for a little, accursed wherever they are found, being seized and massacred completely.
What's really striking here is the severity of the warming.
Yeah, it's a very strong condemnation of their behavior.
It's like their actions have crossed a line and there are real consequences.
It's not just about their internal struggles, but how they affect the community.
Right, their hypocrisy is causing active harm.
And that's why these verses are so powerful.
It highlights that their deception isn't just a personal issue.
It is, and it's a threat to the well-being of others.
Exactly, and that's why their actions cannot be tolerated.
This definitely ties into everything we've been discussing.
Shaking the hypocrite to their core.
Right.
Highlighting the precariousness of their position. They serve as warnings,
Right.
reminders of the consequences of their choices.
So we have these two incredibly vivid analogies.
Right.
Are they simply two sides of the same coin, or do they actually represent different types of hypocrites?
That's an excellent question.
Okay.
And it leads us to a deeper exploration of what these analogies are truly trying to tell us.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Okay.
One interpretation suggests that the fire analogy represents those who initially believed but strayed from the path,
Right.
while the storm analogy describes those who never truly embraced faith from the beginning.
Uh-huh.
What do you think?
That's a compelling interpretation.
Okay.
It highlights the different starting points and journeys of those who fall into hypocrisy. One group had the spark of faith,
Right.
but let it die out, while the other never fully kindled that flame.
So one is about losing your way,
Yeah.
while the other is about never truly embarking on the journey of faith.
But there's another layer to consider. The fire analogy seems very individualistic, focused on a person's internal struggle,
Right.
whereas the storm analogy emphasizes external pressures
Yeah.
and the influence of the environment. What if these analogies are pointing to different factors that contribute to hypocrisy?
It's like two different lenses for understanding a complex phenomenon.
Exactly.
One lens focuses on the internal choices and struggles of the individual,
Right.
while the other considers the external forces that might push someone towards hypocrisy.
Precisely.
Right.
And this raises another question.
Okay.
Which lens is more dominant?
Right.
Do we primarily fall into hypocrisy because of our own internal failings?
Mhm.
Or are we influenced more by the pressures and temptations of our surroundings?
It's a fascinating question, and it makes you wonder if these metaphors could apply to other forms of self-deception or denial we encounter in our own lives,
Yeah,
even beyond the realm of faith.
absolutely.
After all, haven't we all at some point tried to convince ourselves or others that we're something we're not?
Absolutely. Think about the pressure to conform to social norms,
Right.
the temptation to project a certain image online, or
Uh-huh.
even just the little white lies we tell ourselves to avoid facing uncomfortable truths.
Right.
These are all examples of how we can fall into the trap of hypocrisy,
Mm-hmm.
even if we're not consciously aware of it.
So it's not just about religious hypocrisy.
Right.
It's about a more fundamental human tendency towards self-deception.
Exactly. Whether it's a literal fire or a metaphorical one, like ego, ideology,
Right.
or wishful thinking,
Yeah.
we can cling to fleeting sources of comfort or justification that ultimately lead us astray. Hypocrisy can arise from a variety of sources, both internal and external.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a gradual erosion of our values, a slow drifting away from what we once held dear.
Right.
Other times it's a more conscious decision to present a false image, to
Right.
conform to societal pressures, or to protect ourselves from judgment.
So it's not about labeling people as hypocrites or non-hypocrites.
Right.
It's about recognizing that hypocrisy is a complex human phenomenon that exists on a spectrum.
Yeah.
And understanding those different shades of hypocrisy can help us better navigate our own lives and relationships.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that brings us to another important point.
Okay.
Both analogies, despite their differences, point to the dynamic nature of hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a static state.
Yeah.
It's a process,
Mm-hmm.
a journey.
Yeah.
And there's always the possibility of change and transformation.
You're right. We tend to think of hypocrites as stuck in their ways.
Yeah.
But these analogies suggest that hypocrisy is more fluid than we might imagine.
Think about the traveler caught in the storm.
Okay.
He can choose to stay exposed,
Right.
or he can seek shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, the person whose fire has died out can choose to remain in darkness,
Right.
or they can search for a new source of light.
So, even though these analogies highlight the dangers of hypocrisy, they also offer a glimmer of hope.
Yeah,
The potential for change always exists.
absolutely.
Okay.
And that's where the Quran's message becomes even more profound.
Okay.
Remember the verse that says, and if Allah had willed, He could have taken away their hearing and their sight.
Right.
This verse implies that despite our choices,
Uh-huh.
the capacity for change,
Right.
for guidance,
Mm-hmm.
is always there.
It's not a deterministic view of hypocrisy.
Right.
There's always a chance for redemption, for finding our way back to the light, even after we've strayed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The door to guidance is never truly closed,
Right.
but it requires a willingness to acknowledge our own hypocrisy,
Mm-hmm.
to face our fears,
Right.
and to actively seek that shelter, that light that will guide us back to the right path.
So let's get practical.
Yep.
How can we use these analogies to become more self-aware and avoid falling into those traps of hypocrisy ourselves?
One powerful tool is asking ourselves tough questions.
Okay.
What are my true motivations in this situation?
Am I acting in accordance with my values?
Right.
Or am I trying to please others,
Right.
maintain an image,
Mm-hmm.
or avoid conflict?
It's like taking a personal inventory,
Yeah,
checking in with that inner compass to make sure we're still on course.
precisely.
Okay.
And we shouldn't underestimate the value of seeking honest feedback from those we trust.
Right.
Sometimes we need that outside perspective to help us see our blind spots.
It's like having a mirror held up to us,
Yeah,
but in a loving and supportive way,
right.
someone who can gently point out those inconsistencies between our words and actions.
And remember the rainstorm analogy?
Mm-hmm.
It highlights the importance of community,
Right.
of finding those sources of support and guidance that can help us stay true to our values.
Mm-hmm.
If we're feeling lost or tempted to stray,
Yeah.
reaching out to others can make all the difference.
It's a reminder that we don't have to navigate these challenges alone,
Right.
just as the traveler seeks shelter from the storm.
We can find refuge in our communities, in our shared values, and in those who genuinely want to see us grow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what about those moments when our hypocrisy is exposed?
Right.
When we feel like we've been struck by lightning?
Uh-huh.
Those moments can be incredibly painful and difficult to deal with.
They can shake us to our core,
Yeah,
make us question our own integrity.
right.
It's natural to want to deny or bury those feelings of shame.
Absolutely.
Right.
But those difficult moments can also be powerful opportunities for growth.
Okay.
Instead of denying those feelings,
Mm.
we can embrace them as catalysts for change.
Okay.
Remember the analogy of the dying fire?
Yeah.
It's in those moments of darkness that we're often most receptive to seeking a new source of light.
So it's not about wallowing in guilt or self-condemnation.
Right.
It's about using those experiences to fuel our growth, to
Yeah.
become more aligned with our values.
Right.
But how do we actually do that?
It starts with acknowledging the wound, allowing ourselves to feel the discomfort without judgment.
Uh-huh.
Remember that verse about Allah's power to take away our hearing and sight?
Mm-hmm.
It's a reminder that even when we make mistakes,
Right.
the potential for transformation always exists.
Yeah.
We can choose to learn from those experiences,
Uh-huh.
to seek forgiveness, and to commit to doing better next time.
So it's about recognizing our capacity for growth, for change.
Yeah.
And that requires a lot of compassion, both for ourselves and for others.
Absolutely. We all make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
We all fall short of our ideals sometimes.
Right.
The key is to approach those moments with humility and a genuine desire to learn and grow,
Yeah.
and to extend that same grace to others who are struggling with their own inconsistencies.
Because ultimately, these metaphors are not just about pointing fingers at hypocrites.
Right.
They're about reminding us of our shared humanity,
Yeah.
our shared capacity for both delusion and redemption.
Beautifully said. These analogies invite us to look inward, to examine our own hearts,
Uh-huh.
and to strive for a life of authenticity and integrity,
Right.
and to remember that the journey toward true faith and fulfillment
Yeah.
is not about achieving some perfect state of being,
Mm.
but about constantly striving to align our actions with our beliefs.
It's a journey that requires both courage and humility,
Yeah.
a willingness to face our shadows and to embrace the support of those who love us.
Right.
It's not always easy,
Right.
but it's a journey worth taking.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows?
Yeah.
We might even learn to appreciate those storms along the way,
Right.
those moments that challenge us to grow and become more authentic versions of ourselves.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
It's a pleasure.
We hope this exploration of hypocrisy has provided you with some food for thought
Right.
and some practical tools for navigating the complexities of your own life.
Absolutely.
Until next time,
Okay.
keep seeking that light.